In the glittering world of New York's elite, Callum Astor was a king. A titan of technology, his net worth had 10 digits, his penthouse touched the clouds, and his name commanded respect in every boardroom. But within the marble walls of his own home, he was a king with no control. His kingdom was ruled by two small tyrants, his twin children, Serafina and Gabriel. Since the tragic death of their mother 2 years ago, they had become untouchable, systematically dismantling the sanity of every high-priced, Ivy League-educated nanny who dared to cross their threshold. 17 nannies in 24 months. The Astor Mansion had a reputation more terrifying than any corporate takeover. No one could tame the billionaire's twins, until a woman who wasn't even supposed to be there, a quiet maid named Simone Dubois, did something no one else ever thought to do. The Astor penthouse wasn't just a home, it was a statement. Occupying the top 3 floors of a sleek skyscraper overlooking Central Park, it was a universe of glass, steel, and minimalist art. Every surface was polished to a mirror shine, every piece of furniture was a designer original, and the silence was worth more than gold. But that silence was a fragile commodity, always on the verge of being shattered. Callum Astor stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his reflection a ghost against the sprawling city lights. He was a man sculpted from success, sharp suit, sharper jawline, and eyes the color of a stormy sea that missed nothing in the world of finance, but missed everything that truly mattered within his own walls. He loosened the knot of his brioni tie, the silk feeling like a noose. On the custom-built Italian marble island behind him sat a resignation letter, the 17th of its kind. This one was written on the back of a child's drawing of a stick figure on fire, and simply said, "I quit, you can keep the severance. Seek professional help." The author of that note, a highly credentialed child psychologist named Dr. Abernathy, had lasted a record-breaking 4 days. She had been found locked in the pantry, covered in what she hysterically claimed was artisanal, gluten-free slime, and convinced the children had somehow rigged the smart home system to play the Baby Shark song on a continuous house-wide loop at 150 decibels. They had. Callum ran a hand through his dark hair, the exhaustion of physical weight on his shoulders. It had been 2 years since Isabel, his wife, his vibrant, free-spirited Isabel, had been killed in a car crash on a rain-slicked highway. One moment she was there, smelling of paint and lavender. The next she was a gaping hole in the fabric of their lives, a hole his children had decided to fill with chaos. Serafina and Gabriel. From a distance they were perfect, ethereal blonde hair, wide, intelligent blue eyes, a mirror image of their late mother. Up close they were a united front of silent, calculated rebellion. They didn't throw tantrums or scream. Their methods were more sophisticated, more unnerving. They communicated with each other in a series of looks and nearly imperceptible gestures, executing their plans with military precision. They had released a box of monarch butterflies during a state dinner. They had replaced their father's imported Japanese koi fish with rubber ducks. They had convinced Nanny number 12 that the ghost of a Revolutionary War soldier haunted the West Wing. The problem, Callum knew, wasn't just mischief. It was grief, twisted into a weapon. They were protecting themselves, building a fortress of mayhem around their broken hearts, and no one could get through. He had tried everything: therapists, specialists, behavioral experts. They all left, defeated and sometimes slightly traumatized. His phone buzzed. It was his mother, Genevieve Astor. "Callum, darling," her voice was as crisp and cold as a winter morning. "I heard about the Abernathy woman. Honestly, what did you expect? You need someone with backbone, someone from a good family who understands discipline." "Mother, she had a PhD from Yale." Callum sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Book smarts are no match for a lack of breeding, Callum. These children need structure, not psychoanalysis. I've already reached out to the Kensington Agency in London. They place nannies with the royal family." "And they'll last a week tops," Callum muttered, turning back to the window. "I have to go. I have a conference call with Tokyo." He ended the call before she could protest. He couldn't deal with his mother's suffocating brand of help right now. Genevieve saw the twins' behavior as a stain on the Astor name, a social inconvenience to be managed, not a symptom of profound pain. Down the hallway, in the pristine, all-white playroom that their mother had designed, the twins were quiet. Sarah was meticulously building a tower of magnetic blocks, her small face a mask of concentration. Gabe was lying on the floor, disassembling a complex robotic toy with a set of miniature screwdrivers. The silence was deceptive. They were plotting. They always were. The next morning, a new face appeared in the Astor household, but she didn't come through the front door with a resume and a nervous smile. She came through the service entrance. Her name was Simone Dubois. She was in her late 20s with warm, kind eyes and skin the color of rich coffee. She moved with a quiet grace that made her almost invisible, which was exactly what the head housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, had hired her for. Mrs. Gable, a woman who had run the household with stoic resignation for 3 decades, had a simple rule for new staff. Keep your head down, do your work, and do not, under any circumstances, make eye contact with the children. They see it as a challenge. Simone was not a nanny. She was a temporary maid, filling in for someone on maternity leave. Her previous life, a promising career in art restoration, a small studio in Brooklyn, a love that had ended in heartbreak, was packed away in boxes in a storage unit. Circumstances, a sick mother in another state whose medical bills were piling up, had forced her to take any job that paid well and fast. The Astor household paid very, very well. For the first week, Simone followed the rules. She cleaned the endless marble floors, polished the smudges off the glass walls, and tidied rooms that were immaculately tidy to begin with. And she watched. She didn't see 2 little monsters. She saw 2 lonely children drowning in a house that felt more like a museum than a home. She saw the way Gabe would clutch a small, worn teddy bear when he thought no one was looking. She saw how Sarah would sometimes trace the outline of her mother's face in photographs, her finger lingering as if trying to feel her skin. She saw the flashes of raw pain in their eyes before the mask of mischief slammed back into place. The latest nanny, a stern German woman named Helga, arrived on Tuesday. She was a disciple of Genevieve Astor's discipline and structure philosophy. She lasted until Thursday afternoon. Simone was dusting in the main gallery, a long hall lined with priceless abstract paintings, when she heard the commotion. She peeked around the corner. The twins had somehow managed to get onto the roof of the indoor swimming pool enclosure. They were sitting cross-legged, looking down at the frantic, red-faced Helga below. "You will come down this instant!" Helga shrieked, her accent thickening with rage. Gabe just smiled a beatific smile. Sarah, the strategist, pointed to a small keypad on the wall. "It's the security lockdown," she said, her voice clear and calm. "It activates the retractable roof. But you need the password. Mom said it." Helga marched to the keypad and began punching in random codes. "Callum, security." Simone watched the scene unfold. She saw the panic in Helga's eyes, but she also saw the triumphant, desperate gleam in the twins' expressions. This wasn't about defiance. It was about control. It was about their mother. Then Simone noticed something else. A small, almost faded chalk drawing on the slate floor near where the twins were sitting. It wasn't a scribble. It was a symbol, a star with a crescent moon inside it. She'd seen it before. In a corner of one of Isabel's paintings in the gallery, a tiny, almost hidden signature. Helga was still shouting. Security was fumbling with overrides. Callum would be called home from a billion-dollar negotiation. It was the same old story. Quietly, so quietly that no one noticed, Simone walked over to a decorative planter. She picked up a small, smooth stone from the soil. She returned to the edge of the pool, and while all eyes were on the roof, she knelt down. On the polished floor in front of the keypad, she used the stone to gently, silently sketch the same symbol she had seen on the roof, a star with a crescent moon inside. She didn't say a word. She just drew the symbol and then retreated back to her dusting, her heart pounding in her chest. Up on the roof, Sarah's head snapped down. Her eyes widened, first in confusion, then in shock. She nudged Gabe. He looked. For a full 10 seconds, they stared at the symbol on the floor. It was their secret sign with their mother, her special signature. Our secret star, she used to call it. No one else knew. Slowly, almost hesitantly, Sarah stood up. She walked to the edge and looked down, her gaze sweeping past the sputtering Helga, past the security guards searching. Her eyes landed on Simone, who was now carefully wiping down a sculpture, her back to them. Sarah looked at Gabe. A different kind of look passed between them this time. Not mischief, not strategy. It was something else entirely. Wonder. Sarah turned back, took a deep breath, and called down, her voice small but clear. "The password is Stardust." A guard punched it in. With a soft whir, a hidden ladder descended from the ceiling. Helga was fired before dinner, and for the first time, someone in the Astor mansion had cracked the code without even trying to. The quiet maid had just done something no one else had. She hadn't tried to control them. She had tried to understand them. The departure of Helga was less of a bang and more of a quiet fizzle, but the ripple effects were seismic. In the Astor household, the absence of a screaming nanny was a novelty. That evening, a strange calm settled over the penthouse. Callum, who had returned home braced for another post-nanny apocalypse, found his children sitting in the library, reading. Not plotting, not disassembling expensive electronics, just reading. It was so unnerving he checked the security feeds to make sure it wasn't a ploy. He didn't know about the chalk symbol. He only knew that for the first time in 2 years, the storm had momentarily passed. He attributed it to exhaustion on the twins' part, a temporary ceasefire. But Simone knew better. Something had shifted. The next morning, as she was cleaning the playroom, Gabe walked in. He didn't look at her, but he didn't immediately leave either. He stood by the large art easel, his small fingers tracing the rim of an empty paint pot. "The blue is all gone," he said to the room. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. Simone paused her work. "Cerulean blue," she said softly. "It was your mother's favorite, wasn't it? She used it in almost all of her cloudscapes." Gabe's head shot up, his eyes, a startling copy of his mother's, fixed on her. The direct eye contact Mrs. Gable had warned her about. But there was no challenge in it, only surprise. "How did you know that?" "I've been looking at her paintings," Simone replied honestly, gesturing vaguely towards the gallery. "When you look at something long enough, it starts to tell you its secrets." Her secret was that she loved the sky. Gabe was silent for a long moment. He picked up a dry brush and swiped it across the empty canvas. "She was teaching us to mix colors to make stardust." There it was again. Stardust. "Stardust is tricky," Simone said, taking a small step closer. "You can't just mix silver and white. You need a little bit of blue for the distance and a little bit of yellow for the warmth." She wasn't talking down to him. She was talking to him like a fellow artist. He considered her words, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then, without another word, he left the room. Later that day, Simone was assigned the dreaded task of cleaning the twins' bedrooms. Every previous cleaner had described the rooms as booby-trapped minefields. Simone entered Sarah's room with caution. It was immaculate, but in a sterile, joyless way. Books were arranged by color, not title. Dolls sat on a shelf, untouched, their plastic eyes staring into the void. Then she saw it. On the bedside table, tucked under a lamp, was a small, leather-bound sketchbook. It was clearly old, the leather worn smooth. Against her better judgment, compelled by an instinct she couldn't name, she opened it. The pages were filled with Isabel Astor's drawings, quick, beautiful sketches of flowers, cityscapes, her husband's sleeping face. And on the last few pages, there were studies of 2 baby faces, Sarah and Gabe. Beneath one sketch of Sarah, Isabel had written, "My little star watcher, she sees everything." Simone closed the book gently, a pang of sadness echoing in her chest. This wasn't just a sketchbook, it was a relic. The door creaked open. Sarah was standing there, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "You're not supposed to touch that," she said, her voice flat. "I know. I'm sorry," Simone said sincerely, placing the book back exactly where she'd found it. "Your mother was an incredible artist. Her line work is alive." Sarah's defensive posture softened almost imperceptibly. No one had ever talked about her mother's art like that. The staff were afraid to mention her, and her father talked about her with a heavy sadness that made the subject painful. Her grandmother Genevieve referred to Isabel's passion for art as a charming but messy hobby. She was going to teach us chiaroscuro, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. The study of light and shadow. A beautiful, difficult technique, Simone acknowledged. It's all about contrast. You can't have bright light without deep shadows. One gives the other meaning. Sarah looked at Simone, really looked at her, for the first time. The maid's uniform was a disguise. The way she spoke about art, about light and shadow, was not the language of a cleaner. It was the language of a creator, the language of her mother. Who are you? Sarah asked, the question direct and sharp. My name is Simone, and I'm just here to help clean. Sarah didn't believe her, but she didn't press. She just gave a single sharp nod and left. The turning point came that weekend. Callum had been called away for an emergency board meeting. Genevieve Astor had announced she was coming over to hold down the fort, a prospect that filled the entire staff with dread. Genevieve's presence was like a drop in air pressure, signaling an impending storm. She arrived in a cloud of expensive perfume and disapproval, immediately starting to rearrange furniture and critique Mrs. Gable's flower arrangements. She summoned the twins to the formal dining room. We are going to have a lesson in etiquette, Genevieve announced, gesturing to the perfectly set table. Astors do not slouch. We do not place our elbows on the table, and we certainly do not play with our food. The twins sat there like stone statues. This was exactly the kind of suffocating control that triggered their worst behavior. Simone, who was serving water, could feel the tension coiling in the room. She could see the spark of rebellion ignite in Gabe's eyes. He was subtly nudging a full glass of cranberry juice closer and closer to the edge of the table with his fork. Genevieve didn't notice. Serafina, sit up straight. Your posture is atrocious. Sarah's back went rigid. Her gaze flickered to the cranberry juice. It was going to be a disaster. A deliberate statement-making disaster. All over the white silk tablecloth, in Genevieve's cream-colored Chanel suit. Just as Gabe's fork was about to give the final push, Simone stepped forward. Mrs. Astor, she said, her voice calm and steady, I apologize for the interruption, but Mr. Astor's personal chef called with a query about tonight's dinner menu. He mentioned something about deconstructed bouillabaisse that requires your immediate input. Genevieve, who prided herself on her culinary authority, was instantly distracted. Deconstructed? Is Antoine trying to be trendy again? Ridiculous. Where is the phone? As Mrs. Gable expertly led the formidable grandmother out of the room to a non-existent phone call, Simone moved quickly to the table. She didn't scold the twins. She didn't even look at the precariously placed glass. She leaned in close and whispered, Chiaroscuro, she said, just for them. Light and shadow. She subtly moved the glass of dark red juice from the edge of the pristine white tablecloth and placed it on a dark mahogany coaster. She then took Gabe's silver fork and laid it next to a polished silver knife, creating a slash of brightness. Contrast, she whispered, it makes things more interesting than just a big spill. She straightened up and walked away just as Genevieve swept back into the room, complaining about the chef's incompetence. But the spell was broken. The mutiny was over. Gabe retracted his fork. Sarah relaxed her shoulders. They ate their lunch in perfect, unnerving silence. But it was a different kind of silence. It was a silence of consideration. That evening, Callum came home to find his mother gone and his penthouse intact. He found Simone in the gallery, not cleaning, but just looking at one of Isabel's paintings, a swirling, chaotic piece filled with hidden shapes and turbulent colors. It was her last one, Callum said, his voice quiet as he came to stand beside her. She never finished it. It doesn't feel unfinished, Simone replied, her gaze fixed on the canvas. It feels like she was trying to say something important. I have no idea what it means, he confessed, a rare moment of vulnerability. I just see a mess. I see a storm, Simone said. But look, right here in the center. It's darker, yes, but it's also where all the colors come from. It's the source. Maybe she was saying that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the chaos. Callum looked from the painting to this quiet, insightful woman who was supposed to be just a maid. He thought of the 17 failed nannies, the chaos, the desperation, and he looked at the report from Mrs. Gable, which noted the complete lack of incidents for 3 consecutive days. The London agency called, he said. They have a Norland nanny available, triple certified, speaks 4 languages, trained in defensive driving. Simone just nodded, her eyes still on the painting. She sounds very qualified. Yes, Callum said, a decision solidifying in his mind. I told them the position was no longer available. Simone finally turned to look at him, her expression surprised. I don't need a nanny, Callum Astor, the man who had everything, admitted. My children need something else. I'm not entirely sure what it is yet, but I think you might be the only person who speaks their language. He took a breath. The job is yours, Ms. Dubois, if you want it, not as a maid, as their official nanny. Name your price. Simone was stunned. The offer was life-changing. But it was more than that. It was a chance to help 2 children who were lost in the same wilderness of grief that she knew so well. My price, Simone said slowly, is unlimited access to the art supplies. And you have to promise me you'll stop calling what your wife did a hobby. Callum looked at her, a small, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time in a long time. Deal. Simone's transition from maid to nanny was, on the surface, seamless. She traded her simple uniform for her own clothes. Her schedule shifted from cleaning rotations to the twins' daily lives, and her salary was quadrupled. Mrs. Gable gave her a knowing, approving nod. The rest of the staff watched with a mixture of awe and trepidation. They were witnessing a miracle, but they were all waiting for the other shoe to drop. The shoe, when it fell, wore custom-made Italian leather and belonged to Genevieve Astor. She arrived unannounced a week later, her presence sweeping through the penthouse like an Arctic front. She found Simone and the twins not in the sterile classroom, but on the floor of the sunroom surrounded by huge sheets of paper, charcoal, and pots of paint. They weren't just making a mess. They were creating a universe. Gabe was meticulously painting a galaxy, his earlier lesson on stardust in full effect. Sarah was sketching a detailed, fantastical city floating amongst the stars. Simone was showing them how to use water and ink to create nebulae. What in God's name is going on here? Genevieve's voice cut through their quiet concentration. The twins froze. Old instincts kicked in. Gabe's hand twitched towards a pot of black paint. Good morning, Mrs. Astor, Simone said, rising gracefully. She positioned herself subtly between Genevieve and the children. We're studying astronomy today. This is not studying, Genevieve sniffed, her eyes scanning the happy chaos with utter disdain. This is a disaster waiting to happen. You are the nanny, Miss Dubois, not their playmate. Their schedules should be filled with French lessons, piano practice, and polo instruction, not finger painting. Isabel was a painter, Simone stated simply, her voice soft but firm. This is their heritage as much as polo. The mention of Isabel's name from Simone's lips was a declaration of war. Genevieve's eyes narrowed. My daughter-in-law had a charming pastime. She did not, however, neglect her children's proper education. I came to take the children to be fitted for their riding boots at Lob's. Clean this up, and yourselves. The twins looked at Simone, their expressions pleading. An afternoon with their grandmother was a form of exquisite torture. Actually, Simone said, a sudden idea sparking in her mind. We can't go today. Sarah has her appointment with Dr. Finch. Genevieve paused. Dr. Finch? The ophthalmologist? Is there something wrong with her eyes? Just a routine checkup, Simone improvised smoothly. Callum must have forgotten to mention it. His schedule is so overwhelming. Genevieve, while suspicious, would not risk being seen as a grandmother who interfered with her grandchildren's health. She gave Simone a look that could freeze fire and departed, promising to reschedule. Once she was gone, Sarah looked at Simone, her blue eyes wide with a new kind of respect. You lied. I redirected the narrative, Simone corrected with a small smile. Sometimes you have to create a little shadow to appreciate the light. Now let's finish this galaxy before your father gets home. I want to show him. This small act of defiance cemented the twins' loyalty. Simone wasn't just an ally, she was their protector. They began to open up to her in small, fragmented ways. They told her stories about their mother, not just the sad ones, but the funny ones. They told her about the silly songs she used to sing, the way she would let them eat dessert for breakfast on rainy days, and her secret love for terrible, cheesy sci-fi movies. As their trust grew, a new mystery began to surface. It started with Gabe. He and Simone were in the vast, state-of-the-art media room, watching one of the cheesy sci-fi movies his mother had loved. In the movie, the hero found a secret passage behind a bookcase. Gabe turned to Simone, his expression serious. Mom had a secret room. Simone paused the movie. She did? It's not on the blueprints, Sarah added, appearing in the doorway as if summoned. She always seemed to know when her mother was the topic of conversation. We saw the plans once when Dad was renovating. It's not on them. A ghost in the machine, Gabe whispered, quoting the movie. Simone was intrigued. The Astor penthouse was a marvel of modern architecture, documented down to the last nail. A hidden room seemed impossible. Why do you think there's a secret room? Mommy called it her real office, Sarah explained. She said it was where the magic happened. She was going to show it to us on our 7th birthday. But her voice trailed off. Their 7th birthday had been a month after the accident. It had been a quiet, somber affair that no one wanted to remember. We tried to find it, Gabe admitted. We looked everywhere. This, Simone realized, might be the key to everything. It wasn't just a room. It was a promise from their mother, left unfulfilled. Finding it would be like finding a final piece of her. It explained their obsessive knowledge of the penthouse's layout, their pranks involving vents and hidden spaces. They weren't just causing chaos, they were searching. All right, Simone said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Let's be detectives. Where did she spend most of her time? The West Gallery, the twins said in unison. The West Gallery was dedicated entirely to Isabel's work. Unlike the rest of the house, it was vibrant and emotional. Canvases exploded with color. There were brooding landscapes, ethereal portraits, and chaotic abstracts. It was here that Simone had first felt a connection to the family's hidden pain. For the next 2 weeks, the hunt for the ghost room became their secret project. During the day, they followed the schedule of tutoring and language lessons that Simone had implemented to appease Callum and keep Genevieve at bay. But in the late afternoons, they became explorers. They measured walls, tapped on panels, and cross-referenced the digital blueprints on Callum's office computer when he was out. They found several service corridors and maintenance shafts, but nothing that resembled a hidden room. The breakthrough came from Isabel herself, through her art. Simone was staring again at the large, unfinished painting at the end of the gallery, the one she and Callum had discussed. The chaotic swirl of colors. She had always felt it was the key to something. The twins, now comfortable with her, told her their mother had called this painting "My Heart's Labyrinth." A labyrinth isn't just a mess, Simone mused aloud, staring at the canvas. It has a path. You just have to find the entrance. She had the twins describe exactly how their mother used to paint. She was messy, Gabe said. She got paint everywhere. She always had a rag tucked into her jeans, Sarah added, a blue one. And the music, Gabe said. She always listened to her old records, not the digital stuff. Real records. Simone's eyes scanned the gallery. There was no record player. In a house where every form of technology was available at the touch of a button, an old-fashioned turntable would be an anomaly. Her gaze fell upon a large, minimalist sculpture in the corner of the gallery. It was a series of black, metallic cubes, supposedly by a famous German artist and worth a fortune. It had always seemed out of place to Simone, too cold and sterile for a room filled with Isabel's passion. Genevieve had apparently insisted on its placement, calling it a sobering counterpoint to Isabel's emotional excess. Simone walked over to it. The twins followed, curious. The sculpture looked solid, immovable. But as she ran her hand along its surface, she felt something, a tiny, almost imperceptible seam on the side of the largest cube. And etched into the metal, so small it was almost invisible, was a familiar symbol, a star with a crescent moon inside. "Sarah, Gabe," Simone breathed, her heart hammering. "Look!" Their eyes widened. It was their mother's secret sign. Working together, they pushed on the panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then with a soft click, the panel receded, revealing not a handle, but a small circular indentation. like a keyhole for a disc. A record, Sarah whispered in awe. But they had no records. The house was entirely digital. Despair began to creep in. Wait, Gabe said, his eyes darting around the room. He ran to the large labyrinth painting. He pointed to the very center, the dark, chaotic heart of the storm that Simone had identified as the source. Look, the paint there. It's different. Simone and Sarah rushed over. He was right. In the middle of the thick, layered oil paint, there was a perfect circle where the texture was smoother, flatter. Simone touched it gently. It was hard, but it felt hollow underneath. Taking a palette knife from a nearby artist's trolley, Simone carefully, painstakingly, began to scrape at the circle of paint. It flaked away, revealing not canvas, but a dark, grooved surface. With trembling hands, she worked around the edge until she could lift it out. It was a 7-inch vinyl record, sealed within the painting itself. They raced back to the sculpture. The record fit perfectly into the indentation. With another soft click, there was a low hum. It wasn't a door that opened. Instead, a section of the wall behind the labyrinth painting, a wall that was supposed to be a solid, exterior-facing barrier, receded into the ceiling, revealing a dark opening. It smelled of turpentine, linseed oil, and lavender. The ghost in the machine was real. Isabel's secret room. They stepped inside. It was a true artist's studio, a stark contrast to the rest of the penthouse. Canvases were stacked against the walls, sketches were pinned everywhere, and jars of brushes stood like soldiers on a paint-spattered workbench. And in the center of the room, on an easel, was a painting. It was a self-portrait of Isabel, but not the smiling society wife from the photos in the hallway. This Isabel had a fierce, desperate look in her eyes, and she was standing in front of 2 packed suitcases. In the corner of the painting, a small calendar was visible. The date circled in red was the day after she died. But that wasn't the most shocking part. On a small desk next to the easel was a thick leather journal and a stack of official-looking envelopes. The top envelope was addressed to a man Simone had never heard of, a divorce lawyer. The one beneath it was addressed to Callum, and the one beneath that, in Isabel's elegant script, was addressed to Genevieve Astor. The inscription on that one read, "I know what you did." The air in the hidden studio was thick with unspoken words. The smell of lavender, once a comforting scent associated with Isabel, now felt heavy with secrets. The self-portrait on the easel dominated the room. It was a raw, unflinching confession. The packed bags, the desperate eyes, the circled date. It was a story of a planned escape. Sarah and Gabe stood frozen, their young minds struggling to process the image. They understood suitcases. They understood calendars. They understood their mother was supposed to have gone on a short trip to a spa the day she died. This painting told a different, more permanent story. Simone felt a chill crawl up her spine. This was no longer just about helping grieving children connect with their mother's memory. This was something far more dangerous. She quickly scanned the desk. The letters were a minefield. The one addressed to the divorce lawyer was thick. The one to Callum, thinner. But the one addressed to Genevieve, with its damning inscription, "I know what you did," felt like a live grenade. "Simone," Sarah's voice trembled, was Mommy leaving us?" The ultimate childhood fear, abandonment. Simone's heart broke for them. She had to control this. "No, sweetie, never," she said, kneeling to be at their eye level, her voice a rock of certainty in the swirling confusion. "Look around. This room, this art, this was all for you. People who are leaving don't build secret worlds for the people they love. They just walk away. Your mother was trying to build a new life with you." It was a guess, but it felt true. The love in every sketch and painting in that room was palpable. But she knew she had to get the children and the letters out of there before this discovery blew the family apart in the worst possible way. "This was her most special secret," Simone continued softly, "and she left it for you to find. Let's keep it our secret for a little while longer, okay? Just us 3. The twins, conditioned to secrecy and now bound to Simone by this profound discovery, nodded in solemn agreement. Simone carefully gathered the letters, her fingers tingling as she touched the one addressed to Genevieve. She tucked them into the inside pocket of her jacket. As they turned to leave, Gabe pointed to the leather journal on the desk. Her storybook, he whispered. Simone picked it up. It felt heavy, important. They slid the wall panel shut, the quiet hum of its closing sealing the truth away once more. The gallery outside seemed impossibly bright and naive. That night after the children were asleep, Simone sat in her own modest room, the journal and letters laid out before her. Her loyalty was to the children. But the truth, what did the truth belong to? She knew she couldn't read the letters addressed to Callum or Genevieve. But the journal was different. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It was Isabel's own voice. With trembling hands, she opened it. The entries, written in elegant, flowing script, started 2 years ago. They began happily, full of love for her children and a deep, if sometimes strained, affection for her husband. October 12th. Callum closed the Apex deal today. So proud of him. He sees the world in numbers and code, and I see it in color and light. Sometimes I wonder if we're looking at the same world at all. But then he comes home and holds me, and I feel like the axis he revolves around. The twins painted a portrait of him today. It has 3 eyes and green hair. He framed it. But as the entries progressed, a shadow fell over the pages. The shadow's name was Genevieve. January 5th. Genevieve came for dinner. She referred to my studio work as Isabel's little mess. She told Callum in front of me that a wife's primary role is to be a flawless hostess and a reflection of her husband's success. I felt like one of the sculptures she buys, cold, polished, and put in a corner to be admired but not touched. The journal detailed a systematic campaign by Genevieve to erase Isabel's identity. She would accidentally schedule social events on the days of Isabel's art shows. She would make subtle, cutting remarks about the bohemian nature of artists. She pushed for the twins to be enrolled in rigid, structured activities that left no time for the creative, messy play Isabel cherished. Callum, consumed by his work and accustomed to his mother's domineering nature, was oblivious. April 22nd. Callum doesn't see it. He thinks his mother is just being protective. He doesn't understand that she's not protecting him. She's curating him. And I'm the part of the collection that doesn't fit her aesthetic. Today she donated my favorite painting, the first one I ever sold, to a charity auction without asking me. She said it would be good for my profile. I feel like I'm screaming in a soundproof room. The final entries were desperate. Isabel had made a decision. She wasn't just leaving Callum. She was trying to escape his mother's influence and save her children from it. She had secretly set up a new life for them in a small coastal town in Maine, known for its thriving arts community. She had rented a house with a big garden and a studio overlooking the sea. The divorce papers were a formality she planned to serve after she and the children were safely away. The last entry was dated the night before she died. June 14th. Everything is ready. The car is packed with the essentials. The twins think we're going on a surprise vacation. My heart is breaking to do this to Callum, but he will understand one day. He has to. What I cannot bear is what Genevieve will do to my children if I stay. She will polish them until they have no light of their own left. I found out she's been pulling strings to get them on the wait list for that dreadful boarding school in Switzerland, over my dead body. The most frightening part is that I think she knows. Genevieve. She cornered me in the gallery today. She said, "Some things are not meant to be, Isabel. The Astor legacy is stronger than any one person's selfish whims." It wasn't a warning, it was a threat. I wrote her a letter. I told her I know she's been meddling, trying to turn Callum against me, trying to steal my children's future. I'll leave it for Callum to give her. Maybe then he will finally see. Tomorrow we get our sky back. Tomorrow we're free. Simone closed the journal, her hands shaking. Over my dead body. The words hung in the air. The car accident. Had it been just an accident? The rain-slicked road? The remote highway? It was the perfect storm. She couldn't prove anything, but a sickening suspicion took root in her mind. The next day, she knew what she had to do. She couldn't hold on to this. It was Callum's truth to know. She found him in his home office, staring at a bank of monitors displaying stock market data. He looked tired, older than his years. "Callum," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "We need to talk. I found something. The children and we found something of Isabel's." She laid the journal and the sealed letters on his desk. She explained as gently as she could about the secret studio, the painting, and the record. She watched as his face went from confusion to disbelief to dawning horror as he processed her words. His eyes landed on the letters. He picked up the one addressed to him, his knuckles white. He read it in silence. It was short, filled with love and regret. It explained her reasons, her feeling of suffocation, and her desperate need to save their children's spirits. She begged for his forgiveness and promised he could see them whenever he wanted. It was a plea, not an attack. Then his gaze fell on the letter addressed to his mother, and the one for the lawyer. The puzzle pieces clicked into place in his mind, forming a picture of a wife he had tragically misunderstood. She was leaving me, he whispered, the words hollow. It wasn't a question. She felt she was losing herself in your children, Simone said softly. She wasn't running from you, Callum. She was running from the life that was erasing her. A storm of emotion crossed his face. Grief, anger, guilt. The guilt was the most profound. He had been so busy building an empire that he hadn't noticed his own wife was a prisoner within it. At that moment, the door opened. It was Genevieve Astor, dressed for an evening gala, radiating icy authority. Callum, I'm glad you're here. I've just had a word with the headmaster at Dalton. It seems Ms. Dubois has canceled the twins' enrollment interview for next year. I am tired of this woman's interference. Her words died in her throat. She saw the objects on the desk, her eyes locked on the letter with her name on it, held in her son's trembling hand. The blood drained from her face. For the first time since Simone had met her, Genevieve Astor looked afraid. What is this? She demanded, her voice strained. Callum stood up, his 6-foot frame seeming to fill the entire room. He looked at his mother not as a son, but as a judge. It's a letter from my wife, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. She left it for you. It seems she knew a few things. He held it out to her. Genevieve stared at it as if it were a viper. Read it, mother. The command was steel. With a hand that shook almost imperceptibly, Genevieve took the letter. She slid it open with a silver letter opener from the desk. As she read, her carefully constructed mask of aristocratic composure crumbled. Her face turned ashen. The letter detailed every act of manipulation, every veiled threat, and ended with a single devastating sentence. You will not take my children's souls like you tried to take mine. She was leaving, Genevieve whispered, looking at Callum, her eyes pleading. She was going to take the boys and ruin this family. She was selfish, unstable. She was drowning. Callum's voice finally broke, a roar of pain and fury. And you handed her an anchor. You pushed her. You bullied her. You made her feel like a ghost in her own home. I was blind, I was busy, but you saw it all. And you twisted the knife. He took a step closer, his voice dropping again. The accident, mother. Tell me about the accident. She wrote in her journal that you threatened her the day before. She was scared. What did you do? Genevieve recoiled, genuinely horrified. No, Callum, no. I would never. I was angry. I was furious she would try to dismantle everything we've built. I may have called a contact I have in the state transportation department to be alerted if her car passed any major toll booths heading north. I was going to call you. I was going to stop her. But the storm? They said the car just spun out. It was an accident, a tragic accident. Her confession hung in the air, damning in its own right. She hadn't caused the crash, but she had been tracking her daughter-in-law like a fugitive. She had been an active participant in the psychological war that had driven Isabel to flee in the middle of the night into a dangerous storm. Callum stared at his mother, the last vestiges of his boyhood trust in her shattering like glass. He saw her not as his mother, but as a woman so obsessed with legacy and control that she had sacrificed his wife's happiness and nearly his children's on its altar. Get out, he said, the words falling like chips of ice. Callum, please, get out of my house and stay away from my children. He turned his back on her, a final, irrevocable act. Genevieve stood for a moment, a statue of broken pride, then turned and walked out, the empire she had fought so hard to protect now in ruins around her. Callum sank into his chair, the anger draining out of him, leaving only a vast, empty landscape of grief and regret. He looked at Simone, his eyes filled with a pain so raw it was hard to witness. "She's gone," he said. "They're all gone. All I have left is a ghost in a secret room and two children I barely know." "No," Simone said, stepping forward, her heart aching for him, for the children, for the woman she'd never met. "You have the truth, and you have a chance to build something new. You have their mother's last wish." She gestured to the journal. She didn't want them to have a legacy of polo and boarding school. She wanted them to have a life full of color and stardust and love. You can still give them that. He looked up at her, this quiet woman who had walked into the chaos and found the hidden path. She had not only saved his children, but she had also given him back the memory of the real woman he had married. In that moment, he knew his life and the lives of his children would never be the same. The reign of the Astor legacy was over. The age of Isabel's legacy was just beginning. And so, the story of the Astor family was rewritten. The cold marble penthouse began to change. The silent, minimalist rooms were slowly filled with the vibrant color and creative chaos that Isabel had always dreamed of. Callum Astor, the titan of industry, learned to trade stock market charts for finger painting charts. He learned that the most valuable assets he owned weren't companies or properties, but the sound of his children's genuine laughter and the memory of a woman he was finally getting to know through her art. The secret studio became a sanctuary, a place not of sadness, but of celebration. And Simone Dubois, the woman who started as a maid, became the architect of their new world. She was no longer just a nanny. She was a healer, a confidant, in the quiet center of their new, unconventional family. She taught them that the deepest wounds aren't healed by discipline or wealth, but by the radical act of truly seeing someone. She showed them that sometimes the person who can save you isn't the one you expected, but the one who was brave enough to listen to the silence. Thank you for listening to this story. If you were moved by the journey of Simone and the Astor family, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a story about the power of empathy and unexpected connections. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that touch the heart. Let us know in the comments below. What do you think was the most powerful discovery in the secret room? We'd love to hear from you.